This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale in Downing Street.
Good evening from Downing Street, where this morning Theresa May stepped into the spring sunshine and took the political risk of her life. The Prime Minister called for a general election, a decision she told ITV News she'd made during a recent walking trip in Wales. Well, despite repeatedly ruling it out, even as recently as last month, Mrs May said the vote would be a chance for the country to make Brexit a success. The polls suggest it could gain her party up to 100 seats. Well, in just a moment, we'll be looking at what it could mean for the main parties and for people right across Britain. But first, our political editor, Robert Peston, reports on the shock snap election.
Her moment of destiny and ours, calling a general election that few expected and that she repeatedly said she wouldn't hold till 2020.
I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June.
What she needs, she said, is a personal mandate from us to deliver an exit from the European Union on her terms, free from obstruction by opposition and even some of her own MPs.
Division in Westminster will risk our ability to make a success of Brexit, and it will cause damaging uncertainty and instability to the country. So we need a general election, and we need one now. I have only recently and reluctantly come to this conclusion. Since I became Prime Minister, I have said that there should be no election until 2020. But now I have concluded that the only way to guarantee certainty and stability for the years ahead is to hold this election and seek your support for the decisions I must take.
But when I met her this afternoon, I pointed out that the weakness of the government's position in Parliament has been crystal clear all through the months when she said she wouldn't go to the country early.
Nothing fundamental has changed, except the opinion polls, which put you in the lead. So it is pragmatic, cynical self-interest.
No, this is about what is going to be in the best long-term interests of this country. What became clear is that although people in the country have united and recognised the need to take the country forward, actually there are divisions here in Westminster.
Was there a specific moment when you changed your mind on this?
Before Easter, I spent a few days walking in Wales with my husband, thought about this long and hard, and came to the decision that to provide that stability and certainty for the future, that this was the way to do it, to have an election. And, you know, I trust the British people. The British people gave the government a job to do in terms of coming out of the European Union. And I'm going to be asking the British people to put their trust in me in ensuring we deliver a success of that.
One specific risk relates to Scotland. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is bound to say to the people of Scotland that they should vote for the SNP to give her further support for her view that she wants to take Scotland out of the UK.
I will be out there championing the cause of a united kingdom. I believe that we are stronger as a united kingdom. I think this union we have between Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales is a very precious union. I think we all benefit by it.
It's also a critical juncture at the early start of Brexit negotiations, with EU leaders deciding essentially the structure of how to negotiate with us. Will you have the personal resource to put into those talks what's necessary?
Well, yes, but if you think about it, the timing that I said we will have of an election on the 8th of June means that over the next few weeks we will be having our election campaign at the time when the European Union will be getting their decisions about what they want to have in terms of the negotiating strategy together. So there is, if you like, this moment of opportunity for us to do this.
And in an emotional sense, having your own personal mandate rather than one inherited from David Cameron?
Obviously, I stood on the Conservative Party manifesto in 2015, but that manifesto was for a time when there was going to be a referendum, but there was a general assumption that we would stay in the EU. Things have changed. We're leaving the European Union. We need to look now for a different future.
So, a disaster for him, surely, with Labour 20-odd points behind in the polls, more unpopular as an opposition than at any time since the early 1980s.
I welcome the opportunity for us to put the case to the people of Britain, to stand up against this government and its failed economic agenda, which has left our NHS in problems, which has left our schools underfunded, which has left so many people uncertain. We want to put a case out there for the people of Britain.
As for the Lib Dems, all but wiped out in 2015, their leader senses an opportunity for a revival from a direct appeal to all those who didn't want Brexit.
This is an election that gives Britain the chance to change the direction the Conservatives are taking us in, an opportunity to vote against a hard Brexit that I believe the majority of the people join with me in being opposed to keep us in the single market and to make sure that Britain has a strong and decent opposition.
Arguably the best address in Britain, no Prime Minister willingly moves out. Theresa May is risking it in the hope you don't evict her, but give her a new 5-year lease. Robert Peston, ITV News.
Well, the Prime Minister's announcement today signals the start of a frenetic few weeks. Tomorrow, Mrs May will go to the House of Commons to ask MPs to support an early general election. The Fixed-Term Parliaments Act sets elections for every 5 years and can only be overturned if 2/3 of MPs agree. Now, it is likely to pass with the support of Labour and the Lib Dems. Parliament is set to be dissolved on Wednesday, May the 3rd. And the next day, local elections will be held in England, Scotland and Wales. There'll then be a 5-week campaigning period until polls open for the general election on Thursday, June the 8th. Now, the political case for a fresh election is compelling for Theresa May. Her party is currently enjoying a huge lead in the polls, something not seen since the days of Margaret Thatcher. It could give the Conservatives a big Commons majority, but the move does carry with it big risks. Our political correspondent Libby Vina reports on May's gamble.
There should be no general election until 2020. I think if we were to have an early general election, it would just introduce another destabilising factor. I don't think that would be good for the economy, and I don't think it would be good for people and their jobs.
She'd repeatedly ruled it out, and it's a gamble she didn't need to take. Last summer, Theresa May got the keys to number 10 without even having to test her popularity with her party. So why has she taken the risk, and could it backfire? The polls suggest it's unlikely. The latest from YouGov puts the Tories more than 20% ahead of Labour. The Liberal Democrats were third on 12%, followed closely by UKIP on 10%. And as to who would make the best Prime Minister, half thought Theresa May, just 14% said Jeremy Corbyn, while 36% didn't know.
Her own personal ratings are really almost stratospheric for a sitting Prime Minister, and in particular she's a very long way ahead of Jeremy Corbyn, whose personal ratings are, of course, appalling, as bad as they've been for any leader for more than 30 years.
But how did the snap election announcement go down in the Labour-Tory marginal of Birmingham Northfield? Theresa May looks like she's made the right call, despite some voter fatigue.
It's such a big thing, Brexit, and before she can go forward with it, she's got to have the full backing of the country.
It's always been Labour, and then since, I think, everything to do with Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn stepping up, no. It's changed my views on that party completely.
The only reason she's calling it is because she thinks she can win. And I definitely wouldn't vote for the other idiot.
At the moment,
but I'm not going down to vote. I'm not voting for the men and nothing, because they stand there, they lie to your face, and it isn't just one, it's over everything. So they can get lost. I'm not wasting shoe leather on them.
Having made such an issue of trust, did she in fact bow to pressure from senior Tories to produce her Easter surprise?
She's known as someone who is a steady-as-she-goes person, very risk-averse. Has she been pushed into this?
No one pushes Theresa May into things. You know, she makes up her own mind very carefully, over time, taking into account all the facts and considerations. That's what she's done in this case. This is absolutely in her character.
A risk-taker, after all, who hopes voters will now give her a fresh mandate. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said the Prime Minister had made a huge political miscalculation. She said Mrs May was determined to impose more cuts and push Britain further to the right. But she insisted the election would not be about independence. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports now on the Scottish question.
Nicola Sturgeon is still plotting what to do about Theresa May denying her an independence vote. But she says she won't make this election about a referendum.
I have a mandate for a referendum that was won in the Scottish Parliament election last May. This is an election about whether we want to see the Tories in a position where they can do whatever they want to Scotland, or whether we want to stand up and make sure we have strong voices fighting Scotland's corner.
The Prime Minister said now is not the time to talk about another referendum. But ironically enough, it's the Scottish Conservatives who'd be safer to focus on that issue rather than Brexit, given most Scots voted to remain.
The only party that's able to stand up to the SNP in Scotland and put forward that pro-UK argument is the Scottish Conservatives, and I'll be fighting that campaign with gusto.
This will be the 9th vote in just 7 years for people in Scotland. On the streets of Edinburgh this afternoon, there was not a huge appetite for going back to the polls.
I'm sick fed up of elections, referendums. What is it doing? It's doing nothing.
For Scotland, I think it will all be about our position both within the UK and our future within Europe.
What do you think about it?
Stop pushing me on that.
But people here will be pushed again for an answer. The majority of Scots have voted to be in the UK and the EU, but that's no longer an option. They will have to pick a side and a new direction for this country. Peter Smith, ITV News, Edinburgh.
OK, so let's get reaction too then from Wales and Northern Ireland. And our Wales correspondent Rupert Evelyn is in Cardiff and Mark Mallet is at Stormont. Well, first of all to Rupert, what are the key battles likely to be where you are?
Well, it's quite possible when Theresa May was on holiday here in Snowdonia, she looked at the political landscape and thought, I can win here too. Welsh Labour, who rule in the Welsh Assembly, will undoubtedly be feeling pretty nervous despite their bullish comments today. They certainly have the most to lose here. Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood said today, game on. She hasn't ruled out standing herself in this election. And UKIP, well, they had a very good vote last time round, but it's quite possible that they also stand to lose a fair bit. One political commentator said here today that this is quite possible that it will be the first post-war election in which Labour do not win the majority of seats in Wales.
Well, Northern Ireland is the one part of the United Kingdom where voters are becoming something of a bit election weary, this being the fourth trip to the polls in little over a year. 6 weeks after the last Assembly election, there still is no power-sharing executive here. Yes, there have been talks to try and restore devolution, but with the prospect of a general election, it now seems likely that those talks will take a back seat. Now, what have the politicians been saying? Well, the Democratic Unionist Party leader said that this was an opportunity for people to vote for the Union. Sinn Féin say it is a chance to vote against Brexit. And yes, while the Conservatives and Labours may try and build up support here, this will be about unionism versus nationalism. The age-old Northern Ireland sectarian battle lines have once again been drawn.
OK, Mark Mallet and Rupert Evelyn, thank you both. Now, still to come on the ITV Evening News, we report from West Yorkshire on the challenge for Labour to win seats lost in 2015. And we go to the West Country, where the Lib Dem... Hello again, welcome back to Downing Street. Now, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, today welcomed the snap general election, saying he'd put the interests of the majority first and fight against cuts. His party is still smarting from some high-profile defeats 2 years ago. Damon Green reports from West Yorkshire on Corbyn's challenge.
We've been very active in Morley and Outwood. We're out most weekends, we're out quite a lot on the doorstep. We have been for the last 2 years. We keep going.
Here in West Yorkshire, they say this surprise election wasn't a surprise to them. At this Labour club, the activists who were the backbone of the coming campaign have been out on the doorstep since 2015.
I give public notice that Andrea Marie Jenkins is duly elected.
The body blow to Labour that was the defeat of one of its biggest names, Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls.
When it first became clear that Ed had lost, how did that make you feel?
Devastated, and I could have wept when I just couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that he'd lost by such a small amount.
The winner that night was the Conservative Andrea Jenkins by just 422 votes. And if Labour are to have any chance of returning to power, this is a seat they have to win. MPs who did win that night and are loyal to the party leadership say they're in no doubt.
I'm absolutely confident if we get onto policies and what we're actually about and who we're actually looking after, I think the voters will vote Labour because the vast majority of this country are better off under a Labour government.
And here in Morley, whatever the bookmakers' odds against a Labour win nationwide, they're not bothered.
Other people have been given no chance of winning elections and then they've come round and won. You know, somebody like Donald Trump wasn't given much chance of winning, but he won. And it was the same with the Brexit. We need to do the same for the Labour Party now. People have written us off, but I think we can win.
Nobody ever won anything without being confident. Here, Labour have 51 days to turn confidence into votes. Damon Green, ITV News, in West Yorkshire.
The Lib Dems are hoping for a revival after a humiliating election night in 2015. 49 of their MPs lost their seats and the then leader, Nick Clegg, resigned. Geraint Vincent reports from Yeovil in the party's former heartland on Farron's fight.
Disastrous doesn't seem like quite enough to describe the Liberal Democrat performance in the last general election. Nearly 50 seats lost and the leader forced to resign. In their old stronghold of Yeovil, they lost thousands of votes to the Conservatives. But among Lib Dem activists here and now, the fight back is on.
Excited and very positive because I feel that the Tories have done very little in this constituency.
And yes, OK, there's only 50 days up into the next election, but we've had a good, over a year since the last one, and people have had time to change their minds since then.
The Lib Dems will need lots of people in their southwestern heartlands to change their minds. They include areas which voted solidly in favour of leaving the EU.
But they'll begin to recapture those great heartlands in the southwest.
But your party leader talks about Brexit as being a calamity, and yet in the Lib Dem heartlands that you describe, people voted for Brexit. How are you going to campaign on that platform? How are you going to win votes there?
Let's wait and see. I think people did vote for Brexit, unquestionably. Some. Not many yet, but I think that tide will grow, are beginning to wonder whether they made the right decision. But what people did not vote for is the hard, brutal Brexit that Mrs May has chosen.
It's not all about Europe, say the activists, but if the Lib Dems are going to win back their heartlands, they have 7 weeks to convince voters that Brexit is a bad idea. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Yeovil.
Right, well, let's get a final thought now from our political editor, Robert Peston. So we're all set then for June the 8th, are we?
Well, Theresa May, I think, had one of the most nerve-wracking starts to the day because she has to get in a vote tomorrow. 433 votes out of 559. That's a stonking majority she needs. And she couldn't have known how Labour and the Lib Dems would react. Now, they both said that they will vote to dissolve Parliament. Even then, there is still an element of risk tomorrow. I've spoken to a number of MPs who are terrified they're going to lose their seats. And, do they want to be turkeys voting for Christmas in that sense? I think there will be some abstentions and some votes against. But I think Theresa May will get her way because actually when it comes to it, you can't look the electorate in the eye and say you are frightened of their judgment. So yes, I think we are on course for another historic election, heaven help us.
Another one. All right, Robert, thank you very much indeed. And that is it from Downing Street for now. In 51 days' time, in all likelihood, we will be going to the polls to decide who will be in charge here behind me. It doesn't seem very long, does it, since the last time. Tom Bradby's here with a special programme at 10, but from me and all the team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.